So I'm Karen Ripley. I'm a forest entomologist. I work for the U.S. Forest Service, and I coordinate forest health monitoring and I support invasive insect work. And I'm a very generalist forest entomologist. I listen to other people and I consolidate the information that they know better than I do. And Curtis has been just invaluable in a resource for those of us in Oregon. Christine Buell, an entomologist with the Oregon Department of Forestry, provided a lot of information for this talk, and plenty of it was sourced from Curtis as well. So I want to quickly go through some distinguishing features of ambrosia beetle infested trees, the current Mediterranean oak borer status and activities in Oregon, and again, hit on reporting. So some of this should be pretty familiar. So for native ambrosia beetles in the Pacific Northwest, they usually infest dead trees or dead tree parts. And they're very keyed in on specific moisture levels in that wood because they're trying to grow a fungus. They tunnel into the wood, just like it was Chris had that showed how far they could get in it and how much frass they produce. Frass is white colored boring dust. Usually the natives, since they're into dead trees, there's no pitch, and frass noodles are rare and tend to fall apart really quickly. The beetles occupy the sapwood. So that's the outer wood where water is carried from the roots up to the crown. They cultivate fungus to eat. They lay eggs within these tunnels. Sometimes they build side chambers for the eggs and larvae to grow in. Not all the time, but they're super sensitive to wood moisture. Staining reduces the wood value, and you can't export infested wood. Just like in the European Union, stained wood is degraded and can't be traded. However, these non-native ambrosia beetles that carry pathogenic fungi seek out and infest and kill live trees, sometimes healthy trees, sometimes stressed trees. An example of one is laurel wilt, which is carried by the red bay ambrosia. It's a disease caused by the red bay ambrosia beetle, and the fungus Rafaela lauricola, and its hosts are bay laurel, sassafras, and avocado. Another example is rapidohea death, which is a disease caused by two fungi, Ceratocystis leucohea and Ceratocystis huliohea, and it's carried by several ambrosia beetles and is killing a really important component of forests in Hawaii. So here we are on the Pacific coast, and we have the Mediterranean oak borer, Xyloborus monographus, that carries two fungi, Rafaela montitii and Fusarium solani, are actually the main ones. You'll hear from Keith Escalin that they carry many fungi, but these are very important. The hosts are valley oak, blue oak, and Oregon white oak, or Gary oak, in Sonoma, Napa, and Lake Counties, California, and Oregon white oak in Oregon. So like Curtis showed you the picture at the top, where it's found in Europe, and it probably should, the image probably should be extended down into North Africa. This particular one does not include the Iberian Peninsula or North Africa. And then we have these two spots in North America, California and Oregon. It was detected in California in 2017. It was detected in Oregon between 2018 and 2022. There were just a few adults found in traps in Multnomah, Clackamas, Marion, and Washington counties. And those 4 counties are indicated with red. So it's quite contained as far as we know right now. In 2022, an infested tree was found in Clackamas County in the town of Wilsonville, and it wasn't confirmed until 2023. In 2023, an infested tree was found in Multnomah County in Troutdale, and a suspicious tree was found in Salem. And both those trees were destroyed in 2023. I should say more, to continue this, more trees have been detected in Clackamas County, probably at least 30 infested trees. And there was an infested tree that was detected in Troutdale this year, and it's already been destroyed. So Xyloborus monographus, it attacks oaks, white and red sections of quercus. I should have deleted red sections. White quercus. It feeds on fungus, not wood, and it vectors these fungi, Raphaela montitii and Fusarium solani, in the sapwood that causes a fatal oak wilt disease. The females are active and flying most of the year, and I put that in yellow because that was one of the first things we wanted to figure out in Oregon, was what time their flight period would be. So right at the beginning of the year, Christine Buell put out traps around the infested site in Wilsonville, Oregon. And we had just a couple of days over 60 degrees in January, and beetles were caught in the traps. So from that assumption, they were probably similar to California, that it just takes a little bit of warm weather and the beetles can be on the move. So they estimate probably 2 or 3 generations a year in Oregon. In the native range, they feed on weakened oak, harvested logs, dropped limbs, occasionally maple, walnut, beech, elm, cherry, chestnut, hornbeam trees that are stressed. In California, mostly valley oak, but also blue oak and Oregon white oak. There was early on a California black oak that was infested, but Curtis has encouraged us that that's probably not important. It's a red oak, and there was just one tree and it was already very weak. So not to focus on the red oaks. In Oregon so far, we've only observed it on Oregon white oak, Quercus garryana. So here's the range of Oregon white oak in the Western United States. And another California black oak's probably not an issue. Canyon live oak is an intermediate between a red and white oak. And so it is of concern as well, but so far is a lower priority for investigation. So the importance of Oregon white oak: these trees can live up to 500 years. They're the primary overstory in oak prairies. They're extremely drought tolerant. They're an important wildlife resource. They're an important cultural resource to Native peoples. They're really wildfire tolerant. They're deciduous, so they escape damage from annual defoliators. And they've also been discussed quite strongly as a potential replacement for Oregon ash, Fraxinus latifolia, as the emerald ash borer comes through and decimates those populations. Diagnosing Mediterranean oak borer, just like Curtis talked about, we've encouraged people to look for dieback of a section of crown, such as a whole branch, and then looking for pale boring dust, frast. These tiny, teeny holes for when they enter the trees are very difficult to find, especially in a tree that's covered with moss and has typically furrowed bark. The black stained branched galleries that cross the sapwood are also useful. This trellising and crossing of the galleries is more common, is not common in the other ambrosia beetle that affects oak in Oregon. So here's another picture. These came from Curtis. of the single branch and how the Mediterranean oak borer moves down through the crown to the trunk. Here are a couple more pictures of that. The tree on the left is in Wilsonville, and the tree on the right was near Troutdale, which is actually just across the Columbia River from Washington. But this tree, with respect to whether these are healthy trees that are getting killed or stress trees, sometimes it's really difficult to identify how much stress would have been enough. This particular tree on the left had some major roots cut off and construction damage, so it probably wasn't really thriving. The tree in Troutdale may have been affected by flooding. It may have been affected by drought. It was sited in a reed canary grass wetland that had big fluctuating water tables. One thing we're noticing about trees in Oregon is that they may not follow the pattern and our search image that Curtis has set us up with for the initial attack in the crown and then moving down through the crown over a period of years. Several of these trees in Oregon appear to have been attacked at the base initially or simultaneously with the top of the tree. And so this wood-colored frass, especially at the base of the tree, is an even more important symptom than, I think, for Oregon, than the big flagging branch high in the crown. We don't know how to, quantify the relative importance, but looking at the base is really important, even if there's no apparent damage or even a little damage in the crown. The galleries are in the sapwood. They're generally not in the heartwood. There's staining, and the large diameter branches and the boles are last to be attacked in California. We probably are seeing attacks at the base of the tree more quickly in Oregon. Here are some of the things that are occurring now, or partly we're trying to identify where this infestation is. Currently, it's mostly in Wilsonville. And so here's a map. Wilsonville's about 20 miles south of Portland, and in Troutdale, which is about 20 miles east of Portland. So far, we think we've destroyed all the infested trees in Troutdale, but we have several suspicious trees that we keep looking at. And the trees in Wilsonville, some have been destroyed, but some are still there, and it's difficult to assess. It's difficult to assess why specific trees are infested and others aren't. The map comes from a dashboard that people who are surveying for Oregon Mediterranean oak borer are using to record their observations. I put the address up here. Anybody can look at it. So far, they've examined 870 trees, and then the icons about, yes, there are signs, it's confirmed, and that usually requires collection of the insects. It's suspected, it's possible, or there are no signs. Doing more investigations about where it could be located is a high priority. We're continuing to use the funnel traps. Even though Curtis had good luck with the purple panel traps, we already own the funnel traps that we can use to detect the oak borers. There are detection traps that are put out. The goal of this trapping effort is to put traps at 1 per square mile across Western Oregon. And then there are delimitation traps. So any place that a beetle was collected in past surveys will get a certain number of traps around it to identify potentially where the center of that infestation is and if it persists. I've been testing a cheap way that maybe the communities could get involved with trapping and trying to detect Mediterranean oak borer. It uses water bottles that either have holes, kind of a star-shaped hole cut in the side. That was what was used for so successfully for northern giant hornet, or have the top cut and inverted. And these traps would be baited with hand sanitizer, so that would be accessible to the community. So I'm just testing those. Here are a couple of these bottle traps, a paired test hung in cottonwood trees near oaks out in Troutdale. Other work, we want to confirm the identity of the fungi that are present in both the beetle mycangia and in the tunnels in Troutdale and Wilsonville. So here's some chips of wood that were submitted to the Oregon Department of Forestry's pathologist, Gabby Ridikova, and she was trained by Keith Escalon in how to identify the fungi. Another examination is to test if there's a repellency. There's a chemical called piperitone that, and the way you'd set up this kind of experiment is you'd have one trap with just the ethanol bait and then another trap with the ethanol bait plus this repellent. And you'd see if the repellent's able to kind of shut down the efficacy of the ethanol bait relative to what was caught in the pure ethanol. I mentioned before that we don't really understand this pattern of infestation from top down that's observed in California, or are they able to initiate the attack at the base, or are they able to attack simultaneously throughout the trunk? And so this is a tree that's being dissected. It was actually being cut up so those pieces could be burned. I think it only had a visual inspection. And so we need to kind of refine. Every time we have one of these infested trees, we need to have a plan for what kind of work will be done to look at that tree, as well as the logistics of getting the tree destroyed. And so we're working pretty hard at that. Other potential studies include combinations of insecticide and fungicide. Propiconazole was mentioned in use for polyphagous shothole borer. It's also just got a label for avocados and against the laurel wilt disease. So we can learn a lot from these other diseases around the country. Determining the parasitoids and predators of Mediterranean oak borer, a student at Oregon State University, Allison Monroe, is trying to figure out how to do that. How to best treat the trunks, for what size chips are necessary, how to just some of the logistics of examining the trunks before they're disposed of. We'd like to figure out whether the pathogens can spread via roots or chips. And I think we should also try and figure out the moisture limitations of Mediterranean oak borer, whether it's as sensitive to different moisture content of the wood as some of our native beetles. That's really been key for how we control native ambrosia beetles. And maybe it's a factor for Mediterranean oak borer as well. As far as management recommendations now, promote oak tree health. Monthly slow deep watering during the hottest summer months can alleviate drought stress. Don't wound your oaks. Some of the trees, well, one of the trees in Troutdale had a stem wound, and that's where they got the beetles were attracted. We don't recommend you do preventative removal of oak trees. I'm trying to emphasize that people should look for boring dust at the base. And that made me, it's hard to see. It's kind of grayish colored. It's not really bright white. So on several trees that I'm monitoring near Troutdale, I took a hatchet and kind of smoothed out the bark. I didn't whack into the tree. I just smoothed out the bark. I removed the moss around the base. And so now I'm going to keep watching to see if I can see frass, boring dust being produced. Cut infested trees to the ground and chip or burn on site or cover and transport to an incinerator. And it's always important to sterilize your equipment. 70% ethanol, 5% bleach, or hydrogen peroxide or Lysol are effective treatments. There's some resources on here on this slide. The most important thing I want you to gather is reporting. You can report through the Washington or Oregon invasive species hotlines, and those are really prominently displayed on the home pages of the Washington Invasive Species Council and the Oregon Invasive Species Council. People keep close track of those reports. So here's again this dashboard address, and I think if you want to contact me, you're welcome to.